Hi, I'm Ali. I'm one of the physios from treatmyachilles.com. In this video, we're going to be talking about maintenance. So this is aimed for people that have got to a point where their Achilles symptoms have either completely resolved or they're at a point where they're very, very minimal and you can manage and get on with all of your activities day to day and haven't really got any symptoms anymore. We're going to talk about how you can maintain this sort of status quo and anything you can do for the future if you were planning to do a different event or a trip or activity, where that would mean increasing your activity. So I'm Ali, one of the physios from Treat My Achilles. We're a specialist group of physiotherapists interested in all things related to Achilles tendons. So if you have any aches or pains or anything that's injured that Achilles, please have a look at our information below. It will take you to our website where you can see what we do and book an appointment. So talking about maintenance, like we said in the introduction, we're thinking that this video is relevant for people that have got themselves on a nice even keel, either with no Achilles symptoms anymore or a very, very, very small amount. So an acknowledgement that there used to be an injury there on occasion in their Achilles. This is normally related to activity and might be felt the morning after you've done it or just in the moment of activity, and then it disappears completely. And that sort of level of pain we're suggesting would be around a 0 or a 1 out of 10. So for that, like a ghost pain, like I know I've had this injury here. So if you're in that sort of situation and wondering how do I maintain this moving forward whilst I go about my next event or the next goal I've got in my life, or I'm just ticking along quite nicely doing my levels of activity, then this video is for you. So to get to this point, you've probably done a couple of things, one of which is start to initially reduce some of your activity down so the Achilles hasn't been irritated as much, and then start to build up how strong and resilient those Achilles tendons are by strengthening the calf muscles. We have lots of videos on strengthening and different things depending on where your Achilles pain is, whether it's in the mid portion, in that middle section, or whether it's near the bottom. There are slightly different variations on themes on those exercises, and it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So we're suggesting you've got to the point where you've done your rehab, you've built that strength back up. You may have looked at how you're running, how you're walking, how you're moving when you're doing activities. And you may also have looked into any type of footwear that you're doing and adjusting from there. If you haven't got to that point, please have a look at our videos. We've got suggestions on different footwear and suggestions on things that you can do to help reduce your activity to calm things down. So we're at this point. You've had this, done all the hard work, and we're getting back into our activity. So at this point, you will have done probably some calf raises, so raising up onto your tiptoes and back down again. This should have got progressively more difficult over time, and you may now be doing this at a higher level than what you were when you originally started. So this higher level of activity, this higher level of this calf raise is then something we would need to maintain. So we know with strength and conditioning research that maintenance is probably the most useful at about twice a week. So those calf raises with the sets and the reps, maybe the weight, maybe the single leg or double leg, whatever you've been given is what you're then going to maintain at that point. So we know twice a week is pretty good for this, and we know sometimes that might drop down to once a week. So this allows you to have a week off if you go on holiday, a week off if you're poorly, and not worry about losing so much of that strength. When we rehabilitate people back, it depends on what your goals are and who you are, how old you are, how fit you are, anything else going on in your life. So for people that might be more walkers or casually walking and going out walking the dog for a few minutes to an hour a day, may have to do less strength training than those that are your ultra marathon runners, your jumping athletes playing volleyball or basketball or athletics. So you would have a different amount of weight you're carrying. So it's your goal sticks with those things. So ideally, you'd find once to twice a week to fit that in. At that same point, you're then going to be looking at, can I maintain any strength in any other areas of my body? And if we look at government guidelines, particularly for Great Britain, the guidelines are that we should be doing strength exercises around 2 to 3 times a week. So if they can be incorporated into different times where you're doing those other things, that's great. Examples that could work is you turn up at a class in a gym, let's say, or a Pilates class, and you might do your calf raises just in the 5 minutes before you walk into that room. I typically turn up 5 to 10 minutes early for a gym class so I can make sure I've got my spot that I like, and then I go to the loo. Well, in that 5 to 10 minutes, I also could do my calf raises, so I'm not adding any more time into my day. Or I try and keep something, if I'm using equipment like weights or a backpack where I put weights in, I'd keep those in a place that I would be. So, for example, in a kitchen cupboard, on a kitchen bench, I've had some people keep them on top of washing machines where they can shut the door and not see it anymore. And then they go in, put their backpack on and do their calf raises while they're making their breakfast. So it's finding ways that you can attach it to a habit that you've already got and keep that into your routine. So activities can vary. For example, if we're really keen on hiking and walking, it might be seasonal. Maybe you can't do that so much if it's very snowy or icy where you live at certain times of the year. So you're more of an indoors and less step count and less activity. It might be the same if it's more rainy or more slippery. You might not choose to go outside, and you may do less in the winter and more in the spring and summer and autumn, for example. So there's other sports that have off seasons and on seasons. So again, you're doing less activity and more activity. In those times of less activity where we're not using our Achilles as much, it may be more important to put more sessions of your strength at work in, so 2 to 3 times a week now, just to maintain that strength and slightly increase it if you can, waiting for your on-season or your seasonal activity to pick up. This is the same as if we're planning ahead for an activity or an event. So let's say I'm a walker and I know I've got a weekend away where I'm going to be walking multiple days back to back. Well, a couple of months beforehand, you could then think, right, I'm leading up to that. I've been maintaining my weights once, maybe twice a week. Everything's going okay. But now I need to start upping my mileage to get ready for this. Well, how do we do this? So when we're just looking at exercise, what we'd be looking at is starting to fit that in, like I said, definitely 2 to 3 times a week, and then asking yourself a question. If at the end of that exercise, my body is comfortable, it's been comfortable for the next 24 hours, I did that exercise really easily with good technique and I finished it well. Was it easy? Did I fatigue? Did it make my muscles work? Maybe not. Can I push my weights up? Can I change my exercise so I've made it more difficult, slowing it down, adding more repetitions, for example, or changing it slightly from 2 feet to 1 foot? Again, this would be very much an independent person by person, and it may change depending on what your goals are and what exercise you were doing at the moment. So, for example, if you were doing double leg calf raises, you might start to add weight doing those 2 leg calf raises. If you were doing single leg calf raises with 35% of your body weight, you might start adding a few more pounds or kilos onto that and increase how heavy you're holding. So again, it's very different. You then keep challenging yourself over that 8-week period by progressively overloading those exercises. And at the same time, we'd be looking at mileage. Now, let's remove the walking analogy with this, and you could use this example for anything where you've got a goal where you're increasing what I'm going to call volume. So the volume, the number of minutes you're doing an activity. You've got a weekend away where you're going to be doing a lot more walking around a city break. You've got a tennis holiday for a whole week. You're going to run a marathon. Whatever that amount is, where more the volume, the amount of activity you're going to do is increasing over time, we then need to start thinking about us. So at the moment, the amount of Achilles activity your body can cope with, let's say that's in a box. And that box is for you working at a 0 to maybe 1, a push 2 out of 10 level of pain, preferably the lower end of that. When we're adding more volume, we're pushing the top of that box, so our Achilles is losing the capacity to cope if we don't strengthen into this new realm. So that's why we need to start progressing those exercises and making them more difficult. With the volume, we also don't want to go from this is my normal level to here I am. So one of the most common things that cause Achilles problems or flares is a sudden increase in load or a peak in activity. So a good way of trying to look at that is, what activity have I normally been doing over the last few weeks? And that could be measured in number of minutes. It could be measured in how many miles or kilometers you've walked. It could be measured in step count, heart rate, whatever metric you normally use. Then we're looking at, what do I want to do this week? Well, this week I want to go up about 10% of what I did last time. And that's 10% in total. So my whole week, how many minutes or whatever did I exercise? This week, I want to go up about 10%. And then I'd do that again for week 2. I'd do that again for week 3. And somewhere around week 4 or 5, I would now reduce down. I'd have a more restful week. And that more restful week comes from research looking at running performance and research looking at strength and conditioning performance. But it also helps us look at what we call overuse injuries and how we're getting on. So I would look at what I'm doing here. I've gone up 10% for 3 to 4 weeks in a row. My more restful week, I might have gone down, I don't know, about 25, 30%. There's no set amount for that. I've just done far less in that week. That allows my body to adapt to the stimulus of me increasing my weights and increasing my activity. And it allows me to ask myself honestly, am I living with the same amount of symptoms than what I was in the past few weeks? Or have they started to increase? Am I doing the same amount of activity well, or increasing my amount of activity well, or am I compromising here? Because I did that, I am now limping. Because I did that, I didn't do this, or I couldn't do this because there was a problem here. So again, if they're all fine and your metrics are all fine and your symptoms are all fine, then after that 4th week, you go back into that cycle again. Can I go up by 10%? Can I go up by 10%? Can I go up by 10%? So that's one way of checking that your volume isn't doing what we call a boom and bust cycle. So that boom and bust cycle, everything feels great. It's absolutely normal human nature to do this. I haven't got any symptoms. Everything's fine. Back I go. Here's my normal activity. And my normal activity is now a lot higher, more than 10%, if I were to plot a graph. And because I've done that, I might get away with that for a first couple of sessions. I might not. And then gradually my symptoms come back, or all of a sudden they start to come back. And that's then bust. So we've boomed and now we've bust, and we've had to go back to the bottom again. So that 10% increase is something to consider. Another way of looking at the boom and bust cycle could be if we've had to have a few weeks off for whatever reason. So a life stressor or something's happened where we've had to change. We've been ill or unwell and not moved. We've been on holiday and laid on a sun lounger. So something where we've had a week or 2 weeks where we've not really done our normal amount of activity. Again, going from that to suddenly back to normal might be enough to tip you over the edge. So you may need to have a week or 2 just building back up to where you were before that event happened. So there may not be an activity a part of our boom and bust, or our peak in our activity or our load. It could just be a change in footwear. So, for example, we've gone from more higher heel to toe drop footwear, and now we're wearing flatter, less supported shoes. So, for example, I've gone into flat, more fashion trainers as opposed to my exercise trainers with a higher heel to toe drop. Or I've gone from wedges and heels that I might wear if I go to work in an office or something, and I've gone into flatter shoes. That might be enough just to change the loading of the Achilles. Or wearing shoes where you've had to suddenly grip a lot harder to work at keeping them on. So slip-on shoes, flip-flops, welly boots, anything like that, again, is changing the load on that Achilles. Indeed, it might even be terrain change. So you've gone away, you've been away for quite a significant number of weeks, and you're suddenly walking on more elevation. Or you've started to do hill reps in your training sessions when you're running, or you've started to walk through very boggy, muddy fields or on lots of soft sand. Any of those changes, again, change how we use our Achilles. Changing the gradient on the treadmill in the gym, for example, changes how we use our Achilles. So again, those changes we need to look at within that 10% rule. Now, that's really hard. It's really hard to say I'll wear my flip-flops 10% more than what I did last week, or I'll suddenly go for increasing my elevation. How on earth do I measure that? Because I've just gone out on a country walk with some friends. But it just gives you a rough guide that if you're suddenly going from here to here in one of those, that's not the nicest thing for your Achilles. How can you drip feed that in over time? So could you do a few minutes walking uphill and then flatter? Could you drive to the top to meet your friends walking on a hillier walk across the top and do 1 or 2 to start with and then build up the next time? Could you wear trainers or shoes around when you're on holiday into the promenade, for example, rather than and then bare feet or flip-flops when you're walking around the poolside? So just ways that you can vary your footwear and what you can do. Other things to look at if you've been having insertional Achilles issues, suddenly going to more rigid shoes that put a bit of pressure onto the back of that insertion, so where the Achilles inserts into the heel, could be more of an irritant. So again, can you put a heel wedge in that shoe just to sit it slightly higher? Might help it not rub. Or have a look at that type of footwear before you're about to purchase it to see if there's ones with softer or more cushioned parts at the back. And again, we've got videos on all sorts of recommendations for the types of footwear. So we've talked about maintaining once to twice a week. We've talked about the volume, the amount of activity that we're doing, or a sudden change in a boom and a bust cycle. Let's say something's gone wrong here, and now we've got a sudden spike in our symptoms. So we've got a flare up. This can happen time to time, even when we think that things have calmed down. And again, we've got videos on flare-up management. But a good guide is if you've been doing it slowly and steadily and incrementally, that flare-up may not last for very long. If you've been maintaining your strength exercises, again, that flare-up may not last for very long. If we've suddenly got a big jump, it might last a little bit longer. So if we're getting that, can we take a bit of rest? So rest from aggravating activities only. So you might reduce your step count. You might change your footwear to have a higher heel to toe drop. You might be doing things to help calm things down, like massaging your calves. Anything we're adapting our exercises so we're not going up onto our tiptoes or putting rolled mats under our heels when we're doing squats and lunges. And again, we've got a nice video on how to adapt things for yoga, Pilates and squats and lunges, which again, the links can be below if you're more interested in those. We take that load off. We have a rest. Normally with about 3, maybe 5 days, that's a lot easier. Sometimes that might be a bit longer, a couple of weeks or so. And we're just settling those symptoms down. Then we're going to have a look back at our exercises and we're going to see, where were we the last time? Can I do a little bit less to test it and see if I get any symptoms over the next 24 hours? Rough guide for me, 25-30% less, and that's very anecdotal. There's no evidence base to say that, but it seems to be something that works with people. So if you were doing 15 times 3 of an exercise, could you drop to 10 times 3? If you were using 15 kilos with that same exercise, could you now use 10 kilos with that same exercise? So you can drop by about that 25-30%. How am I? Was I okay over the next 24 hours after? Yes, I was. Are my symptoms better than they were last week? Yes, they are. I'll go again and I'll just put that weight up or those number of repetitions back up, and I'd phase it back in over a number of sessions. Probably good to do a day of sessions of exercise and then have a day off so you can evaluate it better and keep things calm until you get back into your normal groove. Now, here comes the important bit. Why did it flare up in the first place? Sometimes we might not have a clue. Sometimes it might just be how the wind blew that day and who knows why that happened. And other times we might be able to find a pattern. And we're going to go through a few things that you can check to see whether any of these ring a bell. Things to check. Have I, honestly, for the last month, 6 weeks, been keeping up with my strength exercises? Am I doing them so that they are the same amount that I was doing when I had finished my Achilles rehab and I have maintained it? Sometimes we go off the ball with this. Sometimes something comes up where we just don't have time to fit these in. We think we're still doing them, but when we look back over the diary, we realise it's been 10 days and then you only did it once. So it's just looking back and thinking, have I kept up with how robust and strong my calf muscles are? Then, have I had a sudden increase in anything? And it may not be just one thing. So, for example, it might be I went out with some friends and I was standing up for the entire evening wearing different footwear. Then I had to go to an event and I had to stand up for a lot. I put my normal activity back in. Oh, but then I walked and ran with a friend and they go slightly faster than I normally do. Or something. Oh, and then I wore different footwear. I don't know. It might be multiple little things that one at a time might not have meant anything at all. But because all 5 of them were done in a short space of time, we've got a high load there. We've got that boom or that bust. And then we know, okay, on a time where this might be happening, actually, what do I need to do? And a good guide normally is looking not just at our volume increases we spoke about, but also at rest. And we need to have at least 1, maybe 2 rest days a week where we're not putting so much pressure onto our Achilles and calf to work out as hard. So that 1 to 2 rest days a week, yes, we do normal life, yes, we do activity, but we might not be going out and doing our sports and activities that particularly hurt our Achilles. You may do nothing sports or activities wise that day, or you might do, let's say, an arm day or a more lying down mat based class or something that doesn't involve anything to do with that Achilles working out. A good day to put that rest day is after our most intense active day of the week. So again, if you were looking at those 5 things, was it because they would normally be fine, but instead of them being spread out through the week, they're all within a bunch, couple of 3 days? Actually, next time you think, I've got this busy weekend, where can I put my rest day in? Maybe I won't do my Achilles exercises at the same time. So it's about planning ahead and seeing if you can see where you might be able to schedule in some rest in between, and looking at whether we've changed our activity in general or lots of different times. A nice way of adding in a cheat rest day, which would be my second rest day of the week, is if I did my activity in the morning of one day and then didn't really do much for my calf and Achilles the rest of that day, the rest of the next morning and up until the evening, and then I did another activity then. So you could kind of fit one in without fitting one in, for example. So if I had a flare-up, I'd ask myself, am I living with more symptoms than have I been over the last few weeks? Where I've been living with, maybe it was 1 out of 10 and now it's crept up to 2 out of 10 and now I can feel it a little bit in the morning and now I can feel it for more minutes in the morning. Has anything been increasing in our slippery slope? Also, over the last few weeks, how's my function being? And is my function related to my performance and how I'm doing things? Can I walk as easily? Can I jump in the gym classes? Can I run as well as I have been? Is there anything that's affected my function and made me have to reduce something or change how I'm doing it? And again, it might be small increments, but if we were to reflect on a week or over the last few weeks basis, we can see we're creeping up. That's giving us a little bit of a warning sign that we may have got something out of whack here. And so therefore I would be thinking, what activities are aggravating? I'll dial those down. I'll concentrate on my strength exercises. I might be doing a really high load week and my Achilles is absolutely fine. But in that week, then I'd probably only do my Achilles exercises once, knowing that in my lower load weeks on either side of that, I might do my Achilles exercises more, so 2 to 3 times, for example, to counteract everything, because the Achilles exercises also count as load. So some weeks we are on holiday and we are doing lots of things. Fine, okay, but just make sure you've done those exercises on either side of that. So a good acronym to think about is something called a VIP, so volume first. So volume we've spoken about. Intensity is our second one, and plan is our third. So our intensity includes that walking faster, the going up and down elevation, and so on. So just to double check on your intensity, can you check back again if you've had a flare-up or you're wanting to maintain that 80% of your week is at a relatively light to moderate load? So when I'm talking about activity, again, I'm talking about time on feet, number of step counts if we're in more of our walking group. And we might be talking about what training sessions I've done in all types. So I might be a runner, but I might also do HIIT classes. I might also do Pilates classes. I might also go to the gym. Whatever I'm doing, or playing paddle on a Sunday with friends, as well as doing these things, they all count as this activity. So can you look at how many minutes you're doing that for? And is 80% at a low to moderate amount? So a low to moderate amount is I'm able to talk and I'm able to have a conversation with somebody whilst I'm doing that activity. And 20% at the most is my most intense activity. So that's just about catching my breath type activity while I can't get a few words out at a time or I can't speak at all. And if I've got that 20% in and it's no more than that, again, I'm not likely to irritate or cause what's called an overuse injury. So an activity that causes, an injury that's happened over time rather than something that's happened with an accident or an incident. So that's our intensity section. And then our plan is based on everything we've just discussed. Have I managed to stick to my plan to increase for my goal or the actual event that's coming up, or have I been doing other things? So was I looking at my walking goal and trying to increase that, but I also have gone in the garden for 3 days straight and done some digging? Actually, I've increased both. What is the priority here? Which one can I try and control more? So could I go in the garden but sit on a stool? Could I delegate certain jobs in the garden? Could I do some in some positions and then some in others to allow me to still do the walking, for example? We have a series on training errors and training effects, and that covers the boom and bust. It covers the volume, intensity and planning. And all of the links to that series with more details is below. There are one other longer video that goes through running and different common training errors in running, and it covers different ways and different tools in a lot more detail. Again, please have a look at those. So in summary, maintenance. Exercises. Am I at the level that I was when my Achilles was okay? I'm in my box and I'm managing this completely fine with the activity I'm currently doing. And when I was doing that, I did these exercises. Have I maintained it? If I want to do more than that and push the limit of the box, can I increase or progressively make those exercises more difficult over time? Aiming to do those once or twice a week. Have I looked at my activity? Is my volume good? Am I increasing in small increments over a few weeks and then maybe having a more restful week to look back and reflect? And is that happening in every activity that I'm doing, or have I suddenly increased lots of different things at the same time? How intense was that activity? And it might be that the activity was the same, but something else changed: the speed, the elevation, the footwear. Can I look back at all of these and try and avoid that peak in that load and bring that back down? And then if I have something that I'm working towards where I know there's going to be a peak in the load, can I adapt these activities? If I'm currently having quite a busy time, I may then reduce the amount of the calf raises I'm doing to once a week or so, just so I can maintain it for that period where it is much busier, so that couple of weeks maximum, and then I would put my exercises back in. Like we said, this isn't a one-size-fits-all approach, so if you are not sure what exercises you should be doing or how to adapt your activity in more detail, this is the sorts of things we can help you with at Treat My Achilles. And again, looking at our information or how to book an appointment, the information is below.